What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Hoodie Chronicles podcast on YouTube, formerly known as Nerds Enigma. Today, I have a special guest, host of Believe in South Carolina, media extraordinaire is what I like to call him because I've known him for a little bit, and author of a new book called Signs at First. And with your purchase of this book, you will help raise money for the Project Hope Foundation, which helps provide services for kids with autism. And his name is Rixon Lane.
What's going on, man? Thanks for having me on.
We had little issues there with the intro first.
That's all good.
So we've known each other, I guess, for a year and a half now, and I wanted to talk to you about. We'll get to the book here in a little bit because that's obviously the most important part of the podcast. But I just wanted to talk to you about a year and a half ago when you were with Coastal, and I contacted you, and you were so accommodating as the first line of defense for Coastal, and I thought, okay, I'm going to see who I need to contact as far as after we first moved down here, as far as being credentialed with the university, because I've covered a bunch of things, but it was a first for Coastal. So I found your name and I gave you a call. Do you remember what I referred to you as when I called you for the first time?
Oh, I don't. Did you call me Lane? Because I get that a lot.
No. So I don't know. I guess I looked up your name and I thought, okay, this dude, I'm new to the area. He's probably going to say no anyways, but I'll go ahead and shoot my shot. So I'll give him a call. I referred to you as Riley Dixon, who's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers kicker. I was like, man, it's close, I guess, but not really. I'm like, I felt like an idiot after that. But you were like, do you mean this? I'm like, yeah, that works too. Your real name works too, I guess.
I had completely forgotten about that, but yeah, now that you bring it up, that's right. I do remember that.
That was our first conversation. I was like, man, what an idiot. What am I doing?
Not the worst thing I've been called.
Really?
No. But most people most people normally go with, they think that Lane is the first name. I've gotten, oh my gosh, man. Normally you either get Rixon, like Rickson. I get that a lot.
Right.
I've gotten Ryan a couple of times. I've gotten Roxon before. So yeah, it kind of,
all right. Roxon's all right.
Yeah, it's all across the spectrum, man. So no, not the worst thing by any stretch.
The only thing I get is my last name. They say Petrie instead of Petrie. I'm like P-E-T, pet, but okay. So like I said, book's the most important part. We'll get to that, but I want to talk to you about, your journey into media and how that all began. And then we'll talk a little about South Carolina's football team and that brutal schedule that they had that I don't think people realize.
Yeah, man. The media thing was just sort of something that I always wanted to do. I grew up wanting to be a play-by-play announcer. That was like the big goal. I was calling my high school's baseball games when I was like in the 8th grade on the local radio station, and wanted to do that for a really long time. Wound up going to South Carolina to got a degree in broadcast journalism. While I was doing that, I was calling high school football for my high school, and then also doing some PA work and just kind of get involved in student media and trying to get into it any way that I could. And got out of college, and all the play-by-play jobs are full because guys get those jobs and they do them until they die. So those jobs weren't open. So I was looking for work and was about to get married. I was working as a substitute preschool teacher, which was exactly as much fun as it sounds. I love my kids. I'm not crazy about everybody else's kids.
I agree.
So wasn't really loving that, but needed to make some money. And then I got a call from my dad who lived in Greenwood at the time, Greenwood, South Carolina. And the baseball program over there, a little D2 school called Lander, they had just gone to the Division II College World Series. They had an opening for their play-by-play guy who was just calling games on like the local radio station there, and went in and interviewed for that job and wound up getting it. While I was there, the baseball team, I was trying to study up on the baseball team because I didn't have really a connection to Lander, and was looking them up and realized they didn't have any sort of social media. They didn't have a Twitter account or anything like that. And this would have been in 2015. So it's not like that was a foreign thing at that point. And I went to the coaches and said, hey, guys, do y'all want a social media presence? Because, you guys are, you just went to the World Series. You're kind of a big deal in this field right now. And they said, we want one, but we don't want to run it. Will you run it? And I never run a Twitter account for a sports team or for an organization or anything, but I said, yeah, I'll try. And so we did that. And it got kind of big kind of quickly. And the the guy at Lander who was in charge of the communications for the school, for the athletic department, his name was Bob Stoner. He's a great guy, but he'd been there for about 25, 26 years at that point. He had come up in newspapers and things like that, so he wasn't really into the new media stuff very much, but he could tell that I was really into it. So at the end of the year, he said, "Do you want to come be my assistant and help out with all this new media stuff with the social media and the website and things that I can do, but it's not really my forte." And at that point, I was like, "Yeah, I need a job, so yeah, I'll do that." And did that for a year, and then after my first year of being his assistant, he retired, and the full-time job came open, and I was 23 and really probably had no business getting that job, but I was there, and I got to know all the coaches because I was working with them on their social stuff, and I knew the AD pretty well and applied for a full-time job and got it. I think when I got it, I think it was the youngest SID in the country, youngest one leading a department at that point. Was at Lander for almost 7 years, then went to Eastern Kentucky for 2 years, and then went to Coastal and was at Coastal for a little over a year. So, yeah, that's kind of how it all came to be.
So let's talk about South Carolina. I know you're the host of that podcast, and besides, going there, I would say you've always been a fan, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, was sitting in the end zone with my dad at football games when I was literally 2 years old. So, yeah, been a Carolina fan my whole life.
So let's talk about their football team. Like I said, a lot of people, look at this season and, there's different thoughts about it. But I don't know every aspect of South Carolina, football this year, but I did, kind of look at the box scores and some stats and things like that. And for their season alone, like what would you say would be the root cause of the issue? Because I dove in and I seen the third down percentage at 31%, the turnovers and all that. So what would you say would be the root cause as far as the down season that they had?
Whew, how much time do you have? I think the main culprit, and there were a lot of things that went wrong for the season. The main culprit was they fielded one of the worst offensive lines I've ever seen on an SEC football field. A complete inability to run the ball. They ran for -9 yards in a game against Missouri. They gave up. I don't remember exactly where they finished, but they were one of the worst offensive lines in the country in terms of sacks allowed. Even though they have a quarterback who's 6'4", 250 and runs a 4.4, but he got sacked about a third of the time he dropped back, it felt like. They had no push up front. Lenore Sellers, their quarterback, regressed this year. He didn't look anything like he did last year. I think a big reason for that was because of the offensive coordinator. Mike Shula ran an offense that was very bland, very predictable, and did not seem to utilize the strengths of that offense, and he didn't last the entire season. He was fired after the Ole Miss game, so it lasted less than a year on that job. And yeah, I mean, the offense was a calamity from start to finish, and which is really a shame because defensively, the defense kept them in games a lot longer than they deserved to be week after week. Clayton White did a really fantastic job as defensive coordinator. The defense has been really solid really ever since he got there, and it was wasted this year because the offense could not sustain drives, could not run the ball, could not execute in the red zone, and it was just sort of it was just kind of one thing after another with this team offensively. And you look at it, they went 4-8, but they were in every single game they played. The only team that blew them out this year was Vanderbilt, and they lost their starting quarterback in the second quarter of that game. But there was never a game this year where they weren't in it in the fourth quarter. They just didn't win any of them.
So let's talk. What was their strength of schedule? Did you see it at the beginning of the season? Because I look at it, and I know some teams kind of snuck up the rankings during the season, but just looking at their schedule was just absolutely brutal. And I think a lot of people may not realize that.
No. We talked about on the show before the season. I said, guys, like South Carolina could be really good this year and go 6-6 because you looked at their schedule and the front half of, Virginia Tech, we didn't know Virginia Tech was going to be that terrible. But you think, okay, Virginia Tech, that's a game you can win. South Carolina State, you should win. Vanderbilt, I thought they would win. I thought Vanderbilt will regress. Vanderbilt won't be what they were. I was dead wrong about that. Missouri, probably a toss-up, could go either way, and Kentucky, a game you should win. So at 5 games into the year, the thought was, at worst, you're 4-1. At best, you're 5-0. But then you looked at the back half of the schedule, and it was, okay, at LSU, who at the time was a preseason top 5 team, Oklahoma at home, who turned out to be way better than we thought they were going to be, then Alabama at home, who was, you knew they were going to be tough, then at Ole Miss, who's a perennial top 10 team in the last couple of years, then at Texas A&M, who's getting it together, and again, at that point, you didn't know they'll be a top 5 team when you go there, but you knew it'd be tough, and then Coastal, and then Clemson. And so what wound up happening was you wound up with LSU when you played them was still, I think they were 11th when they played them, and a night game in Baton Rouge wound up being the most winnable game in that stretch before you got to Coastal. They played 5 ranked teams in a row. They've literally never done that in the history of the program before. And they've been in the SEC since 92. You compounded one of the most disappointing offenses of the millennium for your program with the worst 5-week stretch of games you've ever faced. And that was the result. And then the cherry on top is you lose by 14 at home to the worst team that Clemson's put on the field in 15 years. It was just it started bad and it got worse, and the schedule did them no favors.
So I half looked at their schedule last night, and I didn't look at the record as far as home and away, but I did see that what I thought just from the outside looking in a little bit, that it looked equally just as bad, the home versus away. Would you agree, or would you say one or the other was worse?
I mean, I think the road games were worse just because you went to College Station, where you've literally never won before. You had to go to Ole Miss, which was always going to be a tough game, and you had to go to LSU, which is a tall task no matter how bad they are. And you had to go to Missouri, a team that always plays you really hard. They didn't win a road game this year. They were 0-4 on the road. The home games weren't a lot better, but I mean, it was, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, which again, Vanderbilt hindsight was way harder than we thought they were going to be. But, you had Oklahoma at home, but that's an Oklahoma team you hammered last year in Norman. So you thought maybe that one would be more winnable than it was. You knew Alabama would be hard, and then Coastal and Clemson wound up being a much more winnable game than you thought it was going to be. Maybe when the season started, because Clemson fell off the face of the earth. But yeah, the road games were an abomination this year with who they drew.
So let's look at NIL. I usually, anybody I talk to in and around the game of college football or has any knowledge of college football, I like getting in a little bit of an NIL discussion. We won't spend too much time on it, but as far as NIL itself, what are some changes that you would make? Where do you stand on it? Do you think, there should be more of a cap? Do you think there should be a transfer rule? So, do you think that we haven't seen a conflict of interest yet to where, your center's making $2,500 for the season and your quarterback's making 2.5? So just what are your thoughts, altogether on NIL?
In general, I'm in favor of it. I mean, I want these guys to get paid. In terms of a cap, I don't look, man, if you put a cap on it, then you're basically going back to the old system where people get paid under the table anyway. Like the idea that you think you could guys are getting paid illegally now, and paying them's legal, but they're still getting money in ways that's not technically allowed. So that's never going to stop. In terms of the transfer stuff, again, I got no problem with it. I think, these guys coaches up and leave all the time. So I got no problem with players deciding they want to go somewhere else. The only change I think that I would probably make is to get rid of the early signing day. The early signing day has done nothing but create just really bad situations and unwinnable situations for players and coaches and programs at this point. The early signing day, I think, is not helping anybody out. And I think I would model it a lot like your NFL free agency, where there's an open transfer window once the season ends, once your season ends, and you've got until a certain amount to go into it. And then at least that way you know where you're going, and you know what your team is going to look like. And I think you could put in a mitigating factor for, hey, if your coach leaves, like what they have now, if your coach leaves, you've got a month basically to figure out where you're going to go. But the issue you're running into right now, and I saw firsthand at Coastal and how bad it was, a little less so at Eastern Kentucky, but you get through the season, you have guys move in the portal. Typically at that point is when you're losing your best players, your guys that really played really well, and your guys that see the writing on the wall and don't think they're going to play. They drop down. The guys that play really well get poached by the P4 teams. That's right after the year. Well, then you go through spring ball, and then it happens again because the P4s guys get hurt in the spring, or their guys leave in the spring. So we'd have spring practice at Coastal, and granted, I was only there for one of them, but we had spring practice at Coastal, and we got back in August, and the roster was completely different than it was in April. And I don't know how that's sustainable for any program, but especially the G5 level, and especially with the coaches at the G5 level, like, how are you supposed to build anything at that point? I get that it's happening everywhere, that there's the lower tier power fours are dealing with it as well. But that process of your roster gets completely recycled after the season, and then it happens again before you've ever gotten to fall camp. That's the part I'd like to see kind of mitigated and ironed out, because I don't know who that benefits.
And I've had that discussion several times because it's so tough on the coaches to try to build something at 2 or 3 different points throughout the year, with the roster that you have, and then an influx of new people coming in, people leaving. It's really difficult on coaches. But for me, the one thing I would change is I can never be on board with, a player going to 4 different schools in 4 different years. I think there should be, maybe 2 transfers, maybe 1, but that's something I would like to see changed, because I want to see some loyalty there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that I think I come down on that where, look, if that's what a guy wants to do, I mean, would I encourage a guy to do that? No. I don't necessarily think I want to see them not able to do it, because you never know what the extenuating circumstances are with an individual. But yeah, I mean, it does make it. I'm a college football fan ultimately, and it does make it a little bit more challenging to kind of have that connection with a roster. Like, there's a program that you are maybe watching from the outside and you're just a fan of. It does make it harder, I feel like, to have a connection to the roster. But I will say this, though. It makes the games on Saturday so much more entertaining, because you've got teams that just microwave themselves from 4 wins to 8 wins overnight now. The sport itself and the parity within the sport and the product you're seeing on Saturday, I think, is a lot better now, because guys aren't sitting for 3 years to play. If you can play as a freshman, you're going somewhere where you can play, and that's probably not Georgia, and it's probably not Ohio State. It's probably Virginia, or it's probably Indiana or Tulane, and all of a sudden you see these teams that you're not able to stockpile weapons anymore. Like what Nick Saban was doing at Alabama in like the mid-2000s, where there were 5 stars who were third string. That doesn't happen anymore. And I think the sport's better for it, because those dudes are going places they can play, and they're making immediate impacts everywhere they go.
So let's shift our focus now. I was doing some creeping last night, taking some notes and things, and I saw a couple of videos of you from 13, 14 years ago playing the guitar and singing. Is that something you still do today?
Very, very, very intermittently, if my kids want to listen to music. But no, that would have been for. You probably found the one that I did for extra credit in college.
I found a few of them. There were 3 or 4 at least.
Yeah. There was a couple where your boy needed an A, and so the extra credit was looking real appealing.
All right, so let's talk about your book. Like I said, it's called, after I butchered it in the intro, it's called Signs at First. So just tell me, where did the inspiration for the book come from? I know you have a brother with autism, and I'm sure that was an inspiration. So where does the inspiration come from, and when did you know that you wanted your brother's story to be told?
Yeah, growing up with Colby's 2.5 years younger than I am, so I've been around that world for 30 years now, and It was something where I wanted to write about growing up with that experience of being a sibling, a neurotypical sibling who grew up with an autistic brother for a long time. I had worked on doing something kind of autobiographical, and I didn't like how it was turning out, so I kind of abandoned that. But then I also grew up on like the Matt Christopher, Claire B, Chip Hilton series of books, and so I really enjoyed reading those. My kids both really like to read, so I'd always wanted to write those little sports books, and this seemed like a really good way to kind of marry the two ideas together. So what came out of that was, this story that's fictional technically, but a lot of the stuff in the book was stuff that either I dealt with or kind of similar to situations that I dealt with growing up. It's about a 12-year-old kid who is playing youth league baseball, and he plays first base, and I played first base, and he has an autistic younger brother, and I had an autistic younger brother, and just sort of what life is like at that age, because stuff gets really complicated when you're in the 6th grade. You're starting to your relationships with your friends are developing and changing. Your relationships with people you might like are developing and changing, and your family life's developing and changing, and then you throw all that in the mix, and then you add the fact that you've got a younger sibling who you can't really connect with and are struggling to communicate with, and it just makes things a lot more interesting and a lot more complex. And so I wanted to write about that. And so this is the product of kind of all those ideas coming together.
So the videos you put out about it, I showed my wife, and first of all, I love the title. Like the title is so creative. So where did that come from? Who came up with the title for it?
Oh, it's not the original title. The original title was, I think, the working title was like The Winning Pitch, and then at one point, my wife did the illustrations for the book. They're amazing. And at one point, she just, she came to me and said, "I really don't like the title," and I said, "Yeah, I don't really like it either." She said, "Well, let's think of a different one." And so we kind of brainstormed that a little bit. I don't remember whose idea it was. Like most good ideas in my house, I'm sure it was her idea. But we came up with signs at first, and it just seemed to fit a lot better with what the message and what the story was about.
So how did your brother shape, who you are today?
Oh my gosh. I mean, in ways numerous ways that I can articulate, and probably in a lot of ways that I can't, because I don't even think about them. I mean, when you have someone growing up in your house who, Colby didn't talk till he was 8 years old. So I didn't hear him speak a word that I can understand until I was 10 and a half. You get a lot more patient because you live with somebody who, it just takes a lot to kind of connect with them and get them to understand what you're articulating. You have a lot of trouble understanding what they're articulating, so you develop patience pretty quickly. You develop an ability to smile and pose for pictures way longer than most people. Man, you put me in front of a camera and ask me to say cheese, man, I'll stand there for 3 minutes if I have to, because that's what it took to take a family picture growing up. I mean, it was not a 5-second process. You develop a sense of trying to be a lot more empathetic with people who maybe are different from you, because that's how you want everyone to react to your sibling. You want you want them to treat them the way that you do, and so having somebody who, some of behavior is a little concerning and probably scared some people. But having to articulate to them like, hey, this, he's expressing himself, but he just can't express himself the way you and I can. So this is the only mechanism he has. You and I know that when we're frustrated or upset, it's not, socially really acceptable to bite your hands and hit yourself in the head, but he doesn't know how to he can't tell me what he's feeling. So that's what he has. So it helps you become more empathetic. It helps you to realize all the things that you take for granted. I mean, we talk about, I work at Project Hope now. We talk about extraordinary, ordinary moments all the time, which are just little things that families with individuals with autism just don't really get to experience. There's plenty of families that can't go out to eat at a restaurant. because they've got someone in the family that they can't handle that. You know, there's plenty of parents who don't get told when they pick up their kids how was school because they can't tell them. And they can't communicate it. There's plenty. And I wrote about this in the book. Plenty of siblings don't grow up playing catch. Like, we didn't play catch growing up. That was not something we did. We didn't go on bike rides together. We didn't go to the movies. Like, we didn't do any of that. And it's just these little things that you don't really think about until you realize you never had them, or you realize so many people don't have them. So yeah, it's a different experience. I don't want to say that I wouldn't trade it, because I would. I'd trade it for him being able to do all the things that I think he would be capable of doing if he didn't have autism. But him having autism has had a profound impact on a lot of people, not just myself, because, you know, when he got diagnosed, that's what led my mother to start a preschool, because she wanted him to have a school to go to. And from that preschool, in 1997, that became Project Hope Foundation, which is now the largest provider of autism services as a nonprofit based in the state of South Carolina. That's servicing impacting thousands of individuals a day, and has been for many, many years. So a lot of good has come out of that. I will say that.
So you kind of already answered one thing I was going to ask you, is what is something that, you know, you may want somebody that doesn't understand to understand about autism, and was the book, you know, difficult to write emotionally, certain parts, or, you know, how did that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was difficult to write emotionally. I mean, because this is all stuff that I've thought about for a really long time. Again, I'm 33, so I mean, I've had a lot of time to think about things that happened when I was 12 and 13 and 14 years old. But yeah, I mean, some of it's challenging. I mean, some of it, you know, you recall this and you do start thinking about, okay, we didn't do this, and I see things that my kids do with each other. I got a son and a daughter who about the same age gap as me and him are, and they do things together that, you know, we didn't do growing up. So you think about that. But, you know, I think the thing that I think people who don't know about autism need to understand is just how prevalent it is, man. Like, when Colby got diagnosed, the rate of autism was 1 in 2,500, and now it's 1 in 31. Like, really? There are. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to write the book, because I thought, man, like, there are so many kids who are growing up right now and who are about to enter that age range who are going to have the same experiences that I had growing up. Because, again, the rate has increased exponentially from when he was diagnosed. There's not a known cure for it. Regardless of what you may have heard lately, there's not a known cause and there's not a known cure. There's so many people now that are dealing with this, and so many more people that are impacted by it now than there were 25, 30 years ago. And you know, and that's why I think it's so important for people to understand, how prevalent it is, but also how important it is for individuals to get the services, you know, to be able to go into organizations like Project Hope. And, you know, you've got individuals that have gone through Project Hope, and, you know, have gone on to, like, get college degrees, and they're working full-time jobs now, and they've got social circles, and they're going out to hang out with friends, and they're just doing all these little things. Again, they don't feel like they're huge to maybe you or I, but things that I guarantee you their parents were told, your kid will never do that. Your kid will never go on a sleepover. Your kid will never go to a public school and just have a routine. Your kid will never play sports. Your kid will never go to college. Your kid will never not live with you. Like, you know, so I think that's the thing I want people to take away from it is, it's impacting everyone in some way, shape, or form. And also there are services and systems out there that are there to help, but they need money, man. Project Hope's got to raise $2 million every year as a nonprofit to keep the doors open. So that's one of the main reasons I wanted to write the book through them, was so that portions of the proceeds would go to them, because they need it. Because if they close their doors, there's a lot of families that are going to be without hope, and that's not something that we want to have happen.
So where can we find the book? You know, I'm sure there are a few places we can find the book, but like I said, I'll put a link in the description of this interview for where you can find it. But just, you know, talk about all the outlets that you can find the book.
Absolutely. So it's available right now on Amazon. It's available as a paperback. It's also available as a Kindle. It's available. I did an audiobook version. If you're more like a podcast person, I narrated it, so there's an audiobook version available. It's in Barnes and Noble now. And it's also available directly through the website. If you go to projecthopesc.org, you can find it on the website as well and purchase it that way through Project Hope Media. But any way that you get it, proceeds are still going to Project Hope Foundation. So it doesn't matter what your avenue is.
Okay, and I got one more question for you, and I'll get you out of here. What is one thing that you want people to know about you that they may not?
Oh, geez.
It gets everybody thinking.
Yeah. that if you need somebody to write about sports or talk about them for monetary gain, I am available. That I'm not being paid to do my podcast right now. So if anybody would like to hire someone who's a college football nut and likes to write and talk about it, hit me up. Because I'm open to it as long as I can work it around my work schedule right now. I'm available. So let's talk ball. I love it.
Rixon, thank you so much. And like I said, I'll probably never call you Riley. Whatever I called you the first time was ridiculous in the first place. So
all good, man. You're forgiven. I appreciate you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.